They hadn't told me there would be people. I'd assumed it would be over by morning. One of those early setups where you mop and polish before the lights come on, and all you leave behind is the smell of disinfectant clinging to polished marble. But as I stepped through the side entrance of the Moreau Foundation Hall, clutching my plastic bucket, gloves hanging from my apron, there were already cars pulling in. Big ones, black, shining, the kind that don't rattle when the engine turns. The hallway echoed with shoes too clean for real walking. I froze. The marble floor beneath me was so waxed, I could see the reflection of my own face-tired, plain, dark hair tied back, cheeks still flushed from the subway. I was not supposed to be seen. I was not supposed to enter through this door, while guests in floor-length silks floated past in the distance, laughing under chandeliers. An older woman in an earpiece saw me. "What are you doing here?" She whispered harshly, stepping close. "I was booked for the overnight Clean Maids Co.," I replied, voice quiet. Her eyes narrowed. "That's not until after the event. You weren't cleared for tonight." I opened my mouth, then closed it. The email had said Saturday night, not Sunday morning. I'd reread it 3 times. I reached into my pocket for my phone. "Never mind," she hissed. "Go. Now, through there." She pointed toward a hallway with a green light blinking overhead. I nodded, heart beating fast, and turned. That's when I saw it. A portrait on the far wall. An oil painting towering, gold-framed. A woman in her 50s, seated, draped in gray silk. Pale skin, high cheekbones, and a mouth that matched mine. It stopped me cold. "Go!" The woman barked again, now closer. I stumbled forward, but not toward the green light. Instead, I turned down a quieter corridor. The portraits here were smaller. A man with silver hair and a pinched nose. A dark-haired girl with a slight scowl. Another young man in a naval uniform. I didn't belong here. But my feet kept moving. The cleaning closet was marked with a faded sticker and smelled of bleach and metal. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing. I didn't believe in signs. But that woman in the portrait, she had my face. Or rather, I had hers. My name is Lucia Ferreira. I was born in São Paulo, but raised in Chicago by Ana and Miguel Ferreira, who came to the States to clean buildings and ended up staying when my mother got sick. They never hid that I was adopted. They told me young. "We picked you," they'd say, "from a sea of children, and you were already ours." They were warm, strict, humble people. My mother still cleans offices at 70. I never asked about my birth family. I knew only this. I was left at a hospital when I was 2, with no papers. The nuns said a woman brought me, then disappeared. That should have been the end of it. Back in the hall, I decided to wait. I took out my gloves and began to scrub a side counter no one was using. From here, I could see the ballroom through the glass. Velvet curtains, crystal glasses, the low hum of elite laughter. It was a private fundraising gala for something called the Arcadia Development Project. The Moreaus were hosting. I knew the name. Anyone in Chicago did. They owned real estate from here to the lakefront. Glass towers, whole blocks. Most of the cleaning work we got came from properties tied to them. A man in a navy suit walked past me and paused. He had kind eyes, brown skin, and salt at his temples. "You're not staff," he said. I froze again. No. I mean event staff," he clarified. "You single quotes housekeeping." "Yes." He nodded. "Take a break. It's chaos in there. They won't notice." He smiled. "But if you're curious, you might want to hear the speech. Big announcement tonight." "What kind of announcement?" "New heir to the Moreau estate. The matriarch passed last month, Josephine Moreau. Her will was contested, but the court upheld it yesterday. They're naming the successor tonight." I blinked. "Successor?" He leaned in. One of the sons was supposed to inherit it all. But rumor is ... someone else is in the documents. Someone no one's ever heard of. My throat closed. A daughter? Maybe. Or something messier. I didn't mean to stay. But I stood behind a pillar, just out of sight, as the lights dimmed and the family took the stage. 4 of them. The son, Charles Moreau III, a stiff man with glossy hair and a tight smile. His wife, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. And 2 lawyers in charcoal suits. Tonight, one of the lawyers began. We honor Josephine Moreau's legacy, her vision, her meticulous care for the Arcadia Empire. The son stepped forward. As her only legitimate child, I have carried that vision. Something in the phrasing struck me. Only legitimate. But the other lawyer interrupted gently, per her final testament, that legacy now expands. Gasps, murmurs. In accordance with documents notarized in 1994 and reconfirmed in 2006, Madame Moreau declared the existence of a biological daughter born outside of wedlock conceived during a private relationship not acknowledged publicly. There was silence. The lawyer opened a leather folder. With us tonight, we present photographic records, a certified birth linkage, and the notarized will. These were authenticated in court under seal. Charles stepped forward. This is a disgrace, he said coldly. An error. My mother was not the kind of woman who would, but the lawyer held up a photograph. I saw it clearly from my angle. A younger version of the woman in the painting holding a baby in a hospital blanket. A date stamp in the corner. Another image, the same baby, now a toddler, standing in a modest kitchen beside a dark-haired woman who was not Josephine. The lawyer spoke again. This child was placed under the care of a surrogate for protection. That surrogate was Ana Ferreira. I couldn't breathe. Ana and Miguel Ferreira raised the child as their own. But records show the child Lucia Ferreira was born Lucia Moreau, daughter of Josephine Moreau. A dead hush. I stepped into the light. Whispers rippled. Faces turned. I didn't know, I said quietly. I came here to clean. Charles stared at me. This is some kind of joke. She's the help. Exactly, I said, your help, like my mother was. A murmur of discomfort passed through the crowd. One of the lawyers approached, holding a small envelope. We attempted contact 2 weeks ago, he said. We left letters at your last known address. No reply. I looked down. I live with my mother. She screens the mail. He nodded. We also have documents proving your identity. Hospital files. Photographs. And this, he handed me the envelope. Inside, a letter. Handwritten. Slanted cursive. At the bottom, J. Moreau. I read it slowly. Then again. My mother, I whispered. I demand a DNA test, Charles snapped. Now, the lawyer turned. Already done? And verified by court. The woman beside Charles, the wife, stared at me now. Her eyes didn't show hate. They showed fear. I stood straighter. My hands still smelled faintly of lemon bleach. I hadn't had time to wash them. A man in the back said, "She looks like her. Look at the mouth." Another said, "It's her. Look at the photos." Later, when the guests thinned and the air felt less electric, I stood before the same portrait. Josephine's eyes seemed to follow me. I didn't want money. I didn't want land. I wanted to know why. But in her letter, she'd said it all. I gave you away because the family would never allow it. I thought I was protecting you. I watched from afar as best I could. You cleaned the same floors I once did. Forgive me. I touched the glass frame gently. My gloves were still on. The next morning, the news broke. I watched it alone in my mother's kitchen, the smell of her strong coffee curling through the air. My mother sat across from me, silent. She hadn't said a word since I'd shown her the letter. She'd only run her fingers over the signature, then gone to make coffee like she always did when something broke her heart a little. Woman claims inheritance as secret daughter of Josephine Moreau, the headline read, but it wasn't a claim anymore. The court documents were public. A notary had confirmed the dates, the signatures, the sealed hospital records with my infant footprint inked beside Josephine's name. I was not cleaning someone else's home anymore. I was cleaning through a lie. "You knew something," I finally said. My mother looked up. "You never told me much about how I got here." Her hands folded tightly on the table. "What could I say? They asked me to take you." "I was told not to ask questions." "A woman with sorrow in her face gave you to me in a hospital hallway." "She gave me to you," I whispered. "She chose me," she said. "But she didn't leave a name, not then." Later, someone from the foundation came to our door. They offered money. I refused. "I didn't want you to feel owned. I wanted you to feel mine." I reached across the table and touched her hand. I always did. She finally let the tears fall. A formal meeting was set for Thursday at the Moreau Tower downtown. An entire mirrored lobby floor cleared out for press, family, legal counsel, and representatives of the board. They'd never had to do this before. Not like this. Not with someone like me in the center of it. The lawyer who had spoken at the gala, Mr. Bellamy, met me at the elevator. He handed me a folder, carefully prepared, with tabs and summaries. "I know this is overwhelming," he said, "but everything is in order. The board is mostly here to ask questions. You are not being tested. You are being welcomed." I didn't believe that for a second. The elevator opened to glass, chrome, and reflections everywhere. It was like stepping inside a mouthful of teeth, cold, gleaming. They were already seated when I walked in. 10 men and women in tailored suits, silver pins at their collars. Charles sat at the head. His wife was absent. I didn't sit. I stood behind the chair they'd pulled for me. Charles spoke first. "You're a cleaner," he said. "Is that correct?" "Yes." "You weren't raised in any Moreau property. You had no contact with Josephine, no visits, no acknowledgement. Until now." "Yes." "And yet you expect to be treated as a ... partner?" "No," I said. "I expect to be treated as her daughter." A few people looked down. One woman with gray streaks in her hair scribbled something in a leather notebook. Mr. Bellamy slid a copy of the will across the table. "The language is very clear. 30% of the estate passes directly to Ms. Ferreira. Another 10% is placed in discretionary trust. The remaining assets are allocated to Charles Moreau III, as per original codicils, now reduced to 60%. Charles's jaw tightened. "This estate was built by my family for generations, for me. And now for her," Bellamy said. Another board member, a woman in her 60s with gold-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "Lucia, do you know anything about the Arcadia Development Project?" I shook my head. "No. It's a real estate redevelopment of the West End, historically a working-class area. Your mother was overseeing it personally before she passed. The plan is under scrutiny for displacing thousands. Are you aware of this?" "I wasn't," I said. Another board member said, "She has no business sense. She's a janitor." I spoke clearly. "I know how to make something clean when it's filthy. I know how to spot what people try to hide under rugs. I know when bleach is not enough, and you need to rip the floor out." Silence. Bellamy nodded. "She has standing. She has shares. And she has a vote." Charles stood, slamming his chair back. "She is not a Moreau." Bellamy didn't flinch. "She is, legally and biologically. The court has upheld the claim. The evidence is irrefutable." He opened another folder and passed it around. Included were a notarized hospital registry showing Josephine's name as mother of record on a confidential birth record, A handwritten letter, preserved in a sealed envelope, matching verified samples of Josephine's writing. A series of photographs dated and authenticated by third-party specialists. A certified DNA match optional, but obtained and confirming 99.9% maternal link. Charles paled. The woman with the notebook looked up. She may be new to us, but she is not unknown to Josephine. That's enough for me. They voted to confirm the inheritance that day. It was not unanimous. Charles abstained, leaving the room before the final count, but 6 of 9 approved. The 3 abstentions were noted. When I left the tower, the mirrored lobby reflected me again, gloves in my pocket, folder in hand. I thought of all the years I had wiped down glass like this, erasing smudges. Now I stood inside one of those gleaming boxes, no longer outside looking in. That night, I didn't sleep. The following week, I returned to the West End, the neighborhood where I used to clean apartment lobbies at dawn. I went to see what Arcadia Development had done half-built towers, steel bones where old shops used to be. I passed by a small church with its doors wide open, and I saw her, the woman from the painting. No, not her. It was her sister. I recognized her from one of the photos in the file. Margot Moreau, the only sibling Josephine had. A shadowy figure, long vanished from family affairs. She was standing by a pew, lighting a candle. She turned when she saw me. Her face didn't register shock-only sorrow. I wondered when you'd find this place, she said. Did you know? She nodded. I helped your mother place you. She wanted to raise you herself. But Charles's father threatened to disown her, publicly and financially. She chose silence. It broke her. I swallowed hard. Did you love her? I did, she said. In all the ways they wouldn't let us say. I looked around the chapel. Why here? She came here to pray, even after the towers started rising. Even after they tried to turn this neighborhood into glass and steel. We stood in silence. Margot turned. They'll come after you. Not with knives, with papers, with polished smiles. You're the stain on their perfect surface. Then I'll keep being bleach, I said. She laughed softly. You really are hers. At the press conference 2 weeks later, I stood before a podium inside the mirrored lobby of Moreau Tower, the board behind me. Press seated in rows. Cameras blinking. A microphone fixed to my shirt. I want to begin by thanking the Ferreira family, I said. My real family. The ones who raised me not to chase power, but to stand in truth. The room was still. My name is Lucia Moreau Ferreira. I am the biological daughter of Josephine Moreau. That's not a scandal. It's a fact. And with it comes responsibility. I paused. This company has made its wealth on the backs of workers like my parents. It built its empire while people like me cleaned the corners of its towers before sunrise. Today, that changes. Cameras flashed. I will not sell my shares. I will not walk away quietly. I will use my position to challenge the Arcadia development plans, to introduce protections for displaced families, and to bring labor representatives into the boardroom. I looked directly at the camera lens. My mother gave me a way to protect me. Now I protect her name. Behind me, Bellamy stood with quiet pride. On my left, one of the younger board members nodded. And somewhere outside, I imagined Charles watching from a high window, already plotting. But I wasn't afraid. I had always known how to clean up other people's messes. Now, I would decide what stayed and what had to be scrubbed away for good. 3 months passed. Enough time for headlines to fade, for silence to gather in the corners again. But inside the Moreau Tower, nothing stayed still for long. I spent my days in meetings, most of them stiff, some tense. Others were revealing. The first time I walked into the executive floor conference room alone, I wore gloves. Not because I needed them, but because I remembered what they meant. Protection. labor, distance. I removed them deliberately before taking my seat. "You don't need to do that," said Annette Klein, head of public affairs, her voice tight. "I want to," I replied, folding them beside the glass of water set out for me. They stared, but they said nothing. Sometimes symbols speak louder than speeches. The internal audit began quietly. At first, I asked only for a breakdown of contractor allocations across the Arcadia project. Then I asked about subcontractors, then suppliers, then site safety violations. The board grew nervous. Charles returned from his sudden sabbatical to find a stack of flagged reports waiting in his inbox. "You're using this place to settle a score," he snapped during a closed meeting. I looked at him. "No, I'm making visible what you've hidden under polished floors." His jaw flexed. "I grew up knowing where mold gathers, where rot lives behind walls that look new. And your project is full of it. You're destroying the family's name. I'm reclaiming it." That was the last time he spoke to me directly. It was the mirrors that stayed with me. Every day, as I crossed the lobby or rode the elevator, I saw myself reflected again and again, no longer bent over a mop, but standing upright, documents in hand. But the mirrors didn't lie. They showed me every crack, every uncertainty. I didn't feel like an heir. I felt like someone still waiting to wake up in a linen closet with a to-do list and a rusted cart. But one morning, I arrived early and walked the building floor by floor. I passed night shift janitors, my people nodding hellos. Some paused, startled, not sure if they should speak. Others smiled quietly. They knew me now, and I knew them. When I reached the top floor, the sun was rising through the east-facing windows. The city looked clean from up here, too clean, like it had been scrubbed of memory. I stood for a long time, watching. Then I turned and left my gloves on the ledge, a quiet offering. The final confrontation didn't happen in the boardroom. It happened in a museum. The Moreau family had sponsored the restoration of the south wing of the Museum of City History. A gala was planned, and I was invited not to clean, but to speak. The main exhibit was titled Foundations, Hidden Histories Beneath the City. Fitting. I arrived wearing a dress borrowed from Bellamy's daughter, a sleek, dark piece that made me feel neither disguised nor exposed. I wore no jewelry, only a silver key on a chain, the first key I ever held as a cleaning trainee 20 years ago. It opened nothing now, but it reminded me who I was. I stood under the vast glass dome, surrounded by faces I used to avoid. Developers, donors, city officials. Some of them greeted me with forced smiles, others with genuine curiosity. Most didn't know what to make of me. That was fine. When the moment came, the curator introduced me as a voice of legacy and change. I stepped forward. "I was once told I didn't belong in rooms like this," I began steady, "that I should stay in service corridors, invisible and silent. But here I am. Silence. This museum holds stories that were buried, and I carry one of them." I held up a small, leather-bound book. My mother, Josephine Moreau, kept a journal in her final years. It was not discovered until recently, hidden behind a false panel in her study. The room shifted. In it, she wrote not only of me, but of Margot, her sister, of the love she was told to erase, of the child she was forced to hide, and of her guilt. I opened to a page. I quote, "I see her sometimes, cleaning the lower floors. She does not look up. I want to hold her. I chose her parents well. She stands like Ana, strong and still. My daughter lives." That is enough for now. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. She saw me. All those years. And did nothing. I have forgiven her. Because love can live inside terrible choices. I set the book on the podium. In honor of that truth, and the truths the city still hides, I am establishing the Ferreira Grant for dignified labor fund to provide education, health care, and legal protection for domestic and custodial workers across the city, in her name. And in Ana's, people rose. Applause rang. But one figure remained seated. Charles, his face blank, or perhaps unreadable. As I left the podium, I walked past him. I paused. "You can stay," I said, "but the foundation will never be yours alone again." He said nothing. The papers picked it up quickly. Janitor to heiress, Lucia Ferreira's quiet revolution. The other daughter, museum speech uncovers Moreau's lost legacy. A cleaner's justice, new grant honors invisible workers. I didn't read most of it. I didn't need to. I went back to the South Wing 1 week later, when it was quiet. The exhibit had added a new item to its final room. My gloves, sealed in a glass case beside a black and white photo of my mother, Ana, holding a mop outside the old Monroe building. I cried there alone, because that was the kind of recognition that mattered. I moved out of our small apartment in June, not into a penthouse, not into a tower, into a quiet brownstone in the same neighborhood we'd once cleaned. My mother came with me. She insisted on bringing her old cleaning cart, even though I told her she'd never need to use it again. "I like the wheels," she said, "and the sound. It sits by our front door now. Sometimes I hear her open drawers just to organize them again." Her way of praying. Margot visits sometimes. We speak little. But once she brought me a small box. Inside was a pair of antique silver keys and a faded note in Josephine's hand. "For the home I never gave you. May you unlock what I could not." One key matched nothing. The other opened a hidden compartment in her writing desk, where we found the original deed to the house we now lived in. She had bought it in secret years ago. She'd planned something, not enough, but something. And the Moreau Tower? It remains, but different. I joined the board officially. Charles resigned. Rumors swirled. I didn't care. We restructured Arcadia. We halted evictions. We hired a labor historian. We began placing plaques on buildings acknowledging the workers who built and cleaned them. Bellamy calls it the dignity clause. I call it common sense. One of the clauses I insisted on every new site must include mirrored walls, not for design, but so the people who clean them see themselves reflected too. And remember, they belong. Sometimes, when I speak at schools or events, people ask me if I miss cleaning. I smile. Cleaning, I say, is not what you think it is. It's not erasing. It's revealing. It's paying attention to what others ignore. It's making room for what deserves to shine. They nod, but I know most of them won't really understand. Still, I say it, over and over, like a prayer or a promise. One afternoon in late summer, I returned to the Moreau estate, the original house, now a historic site, partially open to the public. I walked the long marble hallway alone. The floors had been waxed recently. The air smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. At the far end hung the portrait, Josephine in silk. I stood in front of it again, looked her in the eyes. I saw myself there, now not in resemblance, but in resolve. Then I looked to the right, where a new portrait had been added. Ana Ferreira, apron on, gloves in hand, painted in soft oils, with a firm, warm gaze. Below it, a small plaque. Ana Ferreira, worker, mother, chosen family. She held more than a mop. She held a life. That was how the story ended. Not with revenge, but with recognition. Not with fire, but with polish. And a woman standing tall in the mirrored halls they once tried to keep her out of.